Okay, this is a continuation from chapter 2.1. We're starting at question 6. We've already corrected the previous questions yesterday. I can't remember if I made a video. Hopefully I did. If I didn't, well, we're starting at 6. Question 6 says, place each number and its opposite on a number line. So the first question, A, says 8/9. So obviously the easiest way to do is to start with a number line with 0 in the middle. And then if you think about 8/9, it is between 1 and 0. So I'm going to put 1 over here, and I'm going to put -1 over here. I now know the range for where 8/9 will fit and where its opposite will fit on a number line. So how do I place 8/9? Well, there's 2 ways to do it. You could put 8 lines between here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines make 9 spaces. And I'll just take a little, let's do a highlighter. Take a small highlighter. This would be 1/8, this would be 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8, 9, sorry, 1/9, 2/9, 3/9, 4/9, 5/9, 6/9, 7/9, 8/9, 9/9, or 1. So you could start it like that by dividing your number line into the spaces of the denominator. In this case, 9 equal spaces. At which point, you can place 8/9 perfectly. Then its opposite would be right here, equidistant to its original positive value, and you would call this one -8/9. Now, for those of you who are in the vast majority of people in the world that hate fractions, you could have changed 8/9 to a decimal and approximated the decimal value instead of the fraction value. I happen to love fractions, so I kept it as a fraction. Question B, -1.2. Start with your number line, put 0 in the middle. This one is going to extend past -1, so I'm going to put a -1 and a 1, a -2 and a 2. So I'm going to place that on my number line, like this. And now I have my blank number line done to accommodate the actual number of -1.2. Obviously, my spacing here is a little off, but -1 is here. -1.2 would be approximately here, which I'll place there. It's on the left-hand side of your -1, and your positive will be on the other side of it, okay? If we look at, let's just do, I'm going to skip ahead to D. -11/3. Strategy is still the same. Put 0 in your middle. For this one, improper fractions are very difficult to work with. So you probably, I'm assuming, Michael, changed -11/3 to a mixed fraction. How many 3's in 11? There are 3 of them. That's 9 with 2 left over. So you probably converted it to a mixed fraction of -3 2/3, correct? At which point, you now know that -4 will be over here and +4 will be here. You now know your range of numbers. So you have a -1, a -2, a -3, a -4, +1, +2, +3, +4. Does that make sense to people? Okay. The starting logic had to be, well, I can't work with improper. I'll work with mixed. Once I knew that that number was -2/3, -3 2/3, I put my range here. I have to go as far as that. If I think about inside here, each of these being thirds, I'll use red lines here. And I'll use my highlighter again. This would be -1/3, -2/3, -3/3, aka -1, -1 1/3, -2 1/3, -6/3, or -2, -2 1/3, -2 2/3, -2 3/3, or -3. And therefore, our final, oh, I can do this here. This would be, right here, -3 2/3, or -11/3, which is what we actually had. Its opposite is equidistant, which means it's right here. And therefore, -11/3 goes right there. Does that make sense to everybody? Abby, kind of makes sense? Okay. Any questions? Question 8 says compare these 5 rational numbers. Now, real quick, remember a rational number is any number that can be written in the form of A divided by B where b does not equal 0. So all of these can be written in that form because this is a mixed fraction. Could have been a11 b6. This one would have been a negative 5 b3. This one, we could change that to a fraction, would be a negative 1 b10, etc. Just to kind of remind you of what rational numbers are. But when you're given a set of rational numbers in either decimal or fraction form or a mixture of both, if you're going to order them in ascending order, you need to change them all to the same type. Now, Sophie is a weirdo, and she likes to change all hers to fractions with common denominators, correct? Oh, you didn't change them at all. You just knew them. Okay. For the rest of the population that is like, you know, normal, we would change them all to decimals. So my first step is to change this to a decimal. You can keep it to 1 and. This part here is not going to change. It's always going to be 1 and. Your 5/6 will be 5 divided by 6, which equals decimal 833. So that's how you do it. Alternatively, if you don't like doing that because you're not 100% comfortable, you could have changed it to this and then just divided 11 by 6, and you would have got the same answer. Obviously, that's not needed because we understand whole numbers by grade 9, and we don't need to do that. So that's that. Negative 1 2/3 is negative 1 and decimal 6 repeating. We probably know 2/3 from our experience with repeating decimals. Negative 0.1 stays as is because it's not a fraction. 1.9 stays as is because it's not a fraction. And I know negative 1/5. You probably should as well. What is negative 1/5 as a decimal? Does anyone know what 1/5 is as a decimal without grabbing a calculator? Mike, do you know what it is? 0.2. So it's negative. So negative 1/5 equals negative 0.2. Those are the decimals you should know. Once you've converted all of your rational numbers in fraction form to rational numbers in decimal form, now we can order them in ascending order. Technically, the textbook wants you to put them on a number line. I'm okay if you don't. Ascending means you start with the smallest and build up to the largest. When it's negative, Claire, your negative values that are the smallest are the closest to 0 or the farthest from 0. For negative, the smallest numbers are close to 0 or far from 0. The smallness of a negative number. Are the smaller negative numbers closest to 0 or farthest from 0 if they're the smallest of negatives? The farthest, right? Good. So we're looking for the farthest negative number as our smallest, which happens to be this one, correct? So therefore, our first number, our smallest number, we don't write this. We write this. So the first one is negative 1 2/3. We put a comma. We'll put a line through it to make sure we've figured out that we're done with that. What's the next farthest from 0, Abby? Negative 0.2, which we're going to then say is negative 1/5. That's our next one. We're done with that. Our only other negative number is negative 0.1, so we're going to put that as our next decimal. Put a line through it to make sure we figured that out. And now that we're dealing with positive, our closest to 0 is our smallest when they're positive. Our farthest from 0 are our largest. So the next closest to 0, or our next smallest, would be this one, which we're going to write as 1 5/6. And finally, our largest number is simply 1.9. And there we have it in ascending order. Okay? Question 10. Express each fraction as an equivalent fraction. Well, that's an easy one. Hopefully you all chose mine. If you did, you chose negative 4/10. How many chose that one? Perfect. How many chose negative 20/50? Okay. Well, we didn't do 10? Oh, we'll do it now. Well, we'll just do it anyway. Equivalent fraction. If you chose the one I did, how many would choose 20/12 for this one? Okay. Sophia, what do you think I'm going to choose? Sophie, what am I going to choose? Close. 5/3. I made an equivalent fraction not by increasing the numerator and denominator, but by reducing it to lowest terms. 20/12 is fine. I just think 5/3 shows a little bit more kind of academic chops. With that said, how many of you chose negative 18/24 for the next one? How many would say that? How many would think what I just said and revise their statement to figure out a better one that I'm going to write? Michael, what would you say I'm going to write? I'm not going to do negative 18 over 24. That's what the average person. Rilo, what am I going to write? That's right. I'm going to write negative 3/4, right? It's okay. Negative 18/24 is fine. Joey, negative 3/4 just shows you got a little bit more academic chops to your brain. Last question, an equivalent fraction. Now, what am I going to write? How many of you would write negative 8/9 or negative 8/6? No problem. What am I going to write? What do you think, Lincoln? What am I going to write? Okay. What do you think, Michael? Get in my brain for a second. Close. You just forgot. Correct. I'm going to change it to a mixed fraction. That's equivalent, right? Good stuff. All right. Because B was reducible, so I kept it as an improper fraction. D was not reducible, but it was improper, so I said, well, why don't I just make a mixed fraction, right? That's the logic. Question 12, did you have to do that one? Okay. Which value in the pair is greater? You're given two fractions. Now, for some of these, we probably know. Like, this is not going to be rocket appliance. Of the two here, this is the only positive one, so it has to be greater, correct? B, there's a negative and a positive. Which value is greater? If you got that one wrong, you're in a world of hurt. Now we get into some complex ones with C and D, because now we got to do a little thunking. Joey, what is the best way to do some thunking for C to get the appropriate fraction, which is larger?
I would change it to decimals.
Great idea. Change them both to decimals would be negative 0.5 and negative 0.6. Since they're negative, which one is farthest from 0? Which one is closer to 0? So therefore, this is closer to 0 and therefore the greatest of the two fractions. And our last question, if you remember what I said about 1/8, it's this. You could. Listen, I don't make you do it. I'm just telling you the easiest way to do it. Decimals is always easier, unless you're you. Denominator. All right, fine. So she's actually right for this one for a change. There you go. Fine. Is that what you did? How many would have done it my way? Changed it to decimals. How many would have done it Sophie's way and changed it to this? How many didn't do it either way because they're not even listening anymore. They're gone to sleep. Okay. I would have done it my way. Which way is closer to 0? This one is closer to 0, therefore it's the largest of the two. Correct? If you do it Sophie's way, which way is the farthest from 0? This one is the farthest from 0, therefore this is your biggest. Okay? Doesn't matter. Reversing it to question, do we have to do 13? Well, let's try it right now. Okay, let's try these together. So I was talking to the wise and powerful Bree, who told me the easiest way to change fractions to decimals is to take your numerator and divide it by the denominator. So for number 13a, if we do that, 4/7 is going to become 0.571428, 571428, 574128. If you want to write it as a full repeated decimal, you would put your bar above those 6 decimal places because those will repeat forever. But since we're only comparing the magnitude, we're going to just write 3 decimal places. Now all of y'all should know what what 2/3 is as a decimal. What is it? Let's go with Tatum. I haven't picked on you for ages. What is 2/3 as a decimal without looking at your notes? It's the one that everyone knows. Second most important. 0.6 repeating, correct? Which we're going to write like this. Now that we have it in decimal form, which one is the smaller? This one. So therefore our answer for A is 4/7.
Yes, I got that right.
Okay. B, I don't need calculators because I'm incredibly gifted with Does everyone agree with my train of thought, what I did there? I didn't bother, because I'm looking at 3 denominators. I'm thinking, I know all my denominator 3 is decimals. I know that negative 4/3 is negative 1 1/3, and negative 1 1/3 is negative 1.333. For those of you who are not quite as adept, you just did 4 divided by 3, and you grab the same number, right? Same thing with 5/3. Some of you probably reached for your calculator, just did 5 divided by 3 right away, right? But I know that negative 5/3 is negative 1 2/3, which is negative 1.6 repeated, okay? And since we're dealing with the smaller number, when they're negative, they're farthest from 0. Therefore, our smallest number for B is negative 5/3, farthest from 0. C. I'm actually going to employ the SOFI technique for C. I'm not going to use decimals. Yeah, negative 7/10 versus negative 6/10. Which one is farthest from 0? Therefore, it's the smallest. And finally, D. I'm going to employ the SOFI technique again. I'm going to keep it as, no, I'm going to use decimals because I know both of them. I'm not lying to you. I know both of those because I'm pretty good with decimal making. Which one's farthest from 0? Negative 1.8. Therefore, that is your smallest of the two.